Good evening. I'd like to call our special city council meeting. The date is September 13th. The time is 6:09 p.m. Madam Clerk?
Mayor Ronnie Felder, Chairperson Douglas Lawson,
Here.
Chair Pro Tem Shirley Lanier,
Here.
Councilperson Troderick McCoy,
Here.
Councilperson Kashamba Miller Anderson,
Present.
Councilperson Julia Botel,
Here.
City Manager Jonathan Evans,
Present.
Tawana Smith, City Clerk is present, Don Wynn, City Attorney.
Here.
Mr. Chair, you have a quorum, and we do not have anyone to do the pledge tonight.
Thank you, Madam Clerk, and let the record reflect the mayor is on the dais. If we can have a moment of silence, followed by the pledge of...
Also, Ms. Miller Anderson is virtual.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. If we can have a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Welcome back, Councilwoman Lanier. If you could lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, ma'am.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Do we have any additions, deletions, or substitutions?
None from staff, Mr. Chair.
Disclosures by the council? Motion to adopt agenda?
So moved. Second.
Motion been made and properly second. Madam Clerk?
Councilperson Botel,
Yes.
Councilperson Miller Anderson,
Yes.
Councilperson McCoy,
Yes.
Chair Pro Tem Lanier,
Yes.
Chairperson Lawson.
Yes.
That vote passes, Mr. Chair, unanimously.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. With no items on consent, we're going to go straight into our agenda. Item 9A, ordinance on first reading.
Ordinance number 4239, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Riviera Beach, Palm Beach County, Florida, fixing the adjusted tax valuation of real property located within the corporate limits of the city, levying a tax on real property and tangible business personal property located within the corporate limits of the city for the fiscal year beginning on October 1st, 2023, and ending on September 30th, 2024, fixing the millage rate of 8.3500 mills thereon for said year, that the millage rate of 8.3500 is 6.97% higher than the rollback rate of 7.8057, providing for severability clause and providing for an effective date. Mr. Chair, we do have public comment cards on this item. The acceptance on public comment cards for 9A is now closed.
Motion to approve ordinance number 4239.
Second.
Motion been made and properly seconded. Ms. Evans?
Mr. Chair and members of the board, at this time, I'll turn the presentation over to the Assistant Director of Finance, Ms. Nydia Reynolds.
Good evening, Chair Lawson, councilpersons, mayor, and staff.
Really
I'm-
close to Mr. Reynolds.
Pardon me? Sorry. I'm Nydia Reynolds, the Assistant Finance Director for the City of Riviera Beach. Ordinance 4239 is the first item that I'm here to present, which is the ordinance to adopt the millage rate of 8.35 mills for fiscal year 2023 to
Ms. Reynolds,
2024.
pull it closer, please.
The millage rate of 8.35 is based on a taxable value of 7.711 billion, and it's set to generate ad valorem taxes of 64.629 million. The rollback rate of 7.8057 is the rate at which the current tax base of 7.711 billion would generate the same taxes of 59.931 million levied as at the previous year, fiscal year 2023.
Mr. Chair,
Councilwoman Botel, go ahead.
thank you. Could I just ask for an explanation as to what would happen if we reduce the millage rate, let's say by a quarter point or half point? What would the result be in terms of the budget?
Mr. Chair, if I may,
Ms. Evans, go ahead.
with regards to the millage rate and a reduction in the millage rate, if the board was inclined to reduce the millage rate by a quarter mill, it would be about $1.9 million that the city would have to reduce out of the proposed budget. Half a mil is 3.8 million. 3/4 of a mil is 5.8 million, and an entire mil is about 7.7 million. That would have a significant impact on the budget that is provided in front of you this evening, to the point where there would be significant level of service reductions that would have to be made to be able to facilitate such a reduction. One of the things that you will hear as part of the budget presentation is that virtually every good, commodity, and service that we acquire or utilize for the provision of government service has gone up exponentially. And so in order for us to continue to maintain the level of service, or even improve on the level of service, it is staff's recommendation that the board adopt the millage rate of 8.3500 mils. But it would be a significant impact on the level of service that the agency currently provides.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Board members? Questions? Councilman McCoy, go ahead.
Thank you. Ms. Reynolds, you had some microphone issues, so I want to make sure I understood what you said. You said that this is the same amount that we generated last year in Avalon revenue. Is that correct?
No, the rollback rate of 7.8057 is the rate at which the current tax base of 7.711 billion would generate the same taxes of 59.31 million as last year. That's the
Okay.
rollback rate.
Right. So what is the difference between what we collected last year and what we anticipate on collecting in this upcoming fiscal year?
Okay, so last year we collected 59.931. This year we're projected to collect 64.629 million.
Okay. So about 4 million.
Yes.
That's so interesting, because I remember looking at the city's budget 10, 12 years ago, and we were running around $25-30 million. So I just don't understand how we get to just the operational budget, how we get to this point here. I don't understand it, because I don't really see much in terms of a difference 10, 12 years ago than now, as far as the level of service and the things that we do. Obviously, there arguably is the inherent inflation, but outside of that, I certainly don't understand. We haven't had any significant changes that I think really justifies this. And then I have other concerns about operations. So I won't be supporting this millage rate, nor will I be able to support the operations budget.
Thank you, Councilman McCoy. Mr. Evans, if you could opine on Councilman McCoy's concerns and sentiments. I would agree that 10 years later, we haven't had any major infrastructure change. We haven't had any major development. It's pretty much been staffing and operations and cost of living. And even if you factor in 10 years ago, cost of living over the last 10 years, I'm not sure how we got to that substantial jump from 30,000 to, 30 million to up to where we are now.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Please.
With respect to the cost for government services, invariably cost for government services, or cost for any services, goes up exponentially. If you look at the cost of milk 10 years ago versus the cost today, you would see an actual increase, because the cost that it takes to provide said service. Also, you have had economic growth that has occurred in your community. So as your millage rate fluctuates, the revenue and the generation of the revenue comes in for the purposes of providing government services. Now, if there was capital projects that didn't move forward, or things that weren't accomplished in previous years, I can't speak to the specificities as it relates to that. But obviously, the board knows that we're aggressively trying to basically rebuild a lot of our municipal infrastructure. And so the funds are needed to be able to support and continue to support both the cost for government services, but also the future of what our community holds. But if you look at every municipality's budget across the state of Florida, across the nation, they're not operating at the same budget that they were operating at 10 years ago.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Board members? Any public comment, Madam Clerk?
Yes.
If we have
Mr.
public comment.
Scott Lewis?
I was looking for the others.
Welcome,
My
Mr.
name-
Lewis.
Hi, my name's Scott Lewis. I'm at Wilma Circle on the west side of the Intercoastal. I spoke last year about the tax rate. I actually was very interested in hearing your comments, sir, about the tax rate. And I generally, by the time it gets to these meetings, it's already set by the workshops you've gone through in the summer. My personal concern, being on the west side of the lake, is what I'm hearing on the east side of the lake. And for the first time, I've bumped into a couple HOA presidents who have talked about how Riviera Beach over here is sucking all the money out and they're not doing anything to address their budget issues. And you got 60% of the revenue coming across the water. And I know this is probably something you hear about from those residents, but now the difference is, and I was born here, the difference today is that there's a lot of residents over there who were New York or northern residents, and because of COVID, they've declared their residency here. They are voters. That is far more dangerous for this city to ignore those voters. And I would caution you about that. I mean, when I got the water increase bill proposed tonight of 23% increase, and then you've got 17% on general property values. I know you've got the 9% on your budget. I mean, those kind of things bother me. Last year, I talked about your fire station. It's now done. It's a wonderful, beautiful structure. I believe it's the most expensive fire station in Palm Beach County. I'm not positive of that, but I'm pretty sure. Riviera did not need that cow. When I heard that along Dixie or Broadway here, there's proposed in the future to put a new governmental center on prime real estate that could have generated private property tax. That's a problem. When I see that there's affordable housing that needs to get waterfront views, it makes me question whether you're really looking at revenue or are you looking at spending more money. And those are the kinds of things that disturb me. And you know, one idea that I had a nice meeting last year with Mr. Evans after I spoke here. One of the ideas that I've thought about since then, and I've talked with other people, you heard me talk about look at West Palm, and I understand that's a bad word up here. But when I heard their CRA, which has a budget that's 3 or 4 times more than your budget for your CRA, has 9 full-time employees. You all have 35. There's something wrong with that picture. And that's why you're sitting up there to make those kind of tough decisions. I appreciate today, and I close out with an old saying my father taught me. Please be careful. Pigs get fat, hogs get slaughtered. Please exercise
for your comments, sir.
some work. Thank you.
Any additional comments, Madam Clerk?
No, sir.
Roll call, Madam Clerk.
Councilperson Botel?
Yes.
Councilperson Miller Anderson?
Yes.
Councilperson McCoy?
No.
Chair Pro Tem Lanier?
Yes.
Chairperson Lawson?
Yes.
That vote passes 4-1, Mr. Chair, with Councilperson McCoy dissenting.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Item 9B, ordinance 4240.
Ordinance number 4240, an ordinance of the City of Riviera Beach, Palm Beach County, Florida, making appropriations and establishing a budget for the fiscal year beginning on October 1st, 2023, and ending on September 30th, 2024, providing a severability clause and providing for an effective date. Mr. Chair, we do not have any public comment cards on this item. The acceptance of public comment cards for item 9B is now closed.
Motion to approve resolution, ordinance number 4240, sorry.
Second.
Motion been made and probably second. Mr. Evans?
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. This evening is going to be the first reading of the FY 2024 budget. Ms. Reynolds and myself will be duly presenting this item before the board, and if it is the board's pleasure, we can handle both the budget as well as the capital improvements presentation in one presentation, and then we can answer any questions that the board may have. So if you're inclined to support that, I can proceed, Mr. Chair.
Board members?
Yes.
Okay with both presentations?
Yes.
9B and C. Thank you. Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Evans.
So, Mr. Chair, based on the conversation that occurred at our last budget hearing, the board asked for staff to do some research concerning the possibility and the feasibility of bringing on a communication director for the city of Riviera Beach. I've taken the liberty to draft a brief job description, and obviously this is not the expanded job description, but this speaks to the duties and the responsibilities and the expectations with regards to the communications director position. This position would be the spokesperson for all city related activities and would be the principal point person for press inquiries, and then will be required to facilitate a communications and marketing plan, as well as a communications plan and strategies, and oversee the communications division that we currently have in the city of Riviera Beach. Based on the research that I was able to glean from looking at this type of position, we have the requirements as it relates for a bachelor's degree in communication, journalism, or public relations. Most cases, graduate degree is preferred for those higher level positions. From a professional experience perspective, you're looking for 7 years in communications and public relations, and then 3 years in a leadership role. Obviously, they need to have the knowledge, skills, and abilities, but be a strong verbal and written communicator. And then certainly you would want somebody that has the appropriate accreditation associated with that position. So moving into the next element associated with the presentation, it goes into both the pros and cons of the possibility of bringing this particular position on board. From a pro perspective, you can look at unified messaging, consistent messaging coming from one person that serves as your spokesperson. They are expert in handling public relations and public crises, and so they would be the ones that would be responsible for that. Enhanced citizen involvement. They would look at government services and government communications from a perspective that we may not be looking at, as how information is disseminated to the public and how can the public understand what we're effectively trying to accomplish. They will also be a part of the economic development team. They will assist in attracting and investors and retaining businesses and helping market the city of Riviera Beach. From a accountability and transparency, they would make sure that we have clear, consistent, and honest communication, and they would be one that would help promote government accountability. As it relates for the cons associated with the position, you have the issue as it relates to organizational conflicts, overlapping of duties and responsibilities. Right now, you have a public information officer on the police side as well as on the city communication side, and they work in the communications division, and depending on whatever the situation is, resources are deployed accordingly. So with this particular position, you would have a situation where you would have duplication of duties and responsibilities. With those types of roles, it's really hard to pinpoint a direct investment or impact as it relates to an investment, and I'll share with you the budget after this particular item, but it is hard to measure that. Duplication of activities. You have a situation where social media, if a couple people or too many people have access, you could have a situation where multiple messages are put out as a result of that. Short-term versus long-term. I know the city has looked at and has hired marketing firms to help market and promote the city, and that hasn't been a fruitful endeavor. So is this a situation where it is an immediate ask, and then subsequent years it's a situation where the position goes away? And so that's one of the things that the board has to consider. Funding resources, looking at how much the cost would be for the position, and then are there other services or other investments that the board would like to see with those monies versus a situation where you provide for one person on the communications side as a communications director. The learning curve. Anyone that comes into this particular role is going to have a great knowledge base, experience level concerning the city of Riviera Beach. That's the only way that they will be successful, is understanding the nuances of the community. And then the public perception, obviously what the cost for the position is and what the impression is going to be, both from the board as well as the taxpayer, concerning the costs associated with this one particular position. Just to move on into the budget, and which is the more meat and potatoes part of the presentation, is that this particular position would be in the range of anywhere between $95,000 to $125,000 a year. When you look at the cost for the position, one of the things we've had the conversation with the board about is what is referred to and we call in administration the hidden paycheck. And so even though the salary is $95,000, there are a total of $120,000 on the low end to employ that person, up to $166,000 on the high end when you put in the different benefits and perks that are provided. And so in totality, you're looking at the position roughly costing on an annual basis, and that obviously increases of probably close to $169,000 a year. And so the board asked for this discussion. Staff has done the research and is here to answer any question and seek direction from the board as to how you would like to proceed related to this particular position.
Thank you, Ms. Evans. Board members?
Chair,
Councilwoman Pro Tem, go ahead.
what is the amount of individuals now that we have under the auspices of communications?
So right now you have the assistant to the city manager that manages the function. You have 2 public information officers. You have a multimedia producer that's currently in the position. So those are the folks that are in the unit. And then you have a part-time production assistant position.
And could you tell me roughly, like in terms of salary, like just a guesstimate of those 4.5 positions?
You're looking at approximation for wages is anywhere probably from $87,000 to $97,000 a year.
Each.
Correct, each.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And just a quick follow-up before I go to colleagues. Who do those 4 staffers report to?
Those 4 staffers report to Ms. Grimsley, with the PIO for the police department having direct or dotted line reporting to Ms. Grimsley, but reports to the chief of police.
So they report to Ms. Grimsley. Ms. Grimsley has the background and expertise in marketing, media, and communications?
Mr. Chair, if I may?
Please.
Ms. Grimsley doesn't have the degrees and experience related specific in communications, but it is common. Actually, that was one of the departments that I managed when I was an assistant to the city manager, because we never had a bona fide communications director. So she doesn't have the what would be qualified as it relates to the job description that was drafted. She's got different skills, knowledge, and abilities.
And do we have a unified marketing strategy amongst all those different departments?
Mr. Chair?
Mr. Evans?
As it relates to a written marketing plan, there's not a written marketing plan. The positions have most recently been filled, I think we've just brought the last person on less than 2 months. But I know that a communications plan, as well as a marketing plan, as well as a style guide, is something that they're all working on from the communications standpoint. But there's not a bona fide plan that they have drafted, because we've had some attrition in those positions.
And I guess to those points, colleagues, that's where I've been harping on this for about 4 years. There's been a few things that I've been very bullish on. Our disparity study, our parking plan, and our communications marketing director. We have to tell our story. We have close to $1 billion in development. We have dollars that are being spent. We've had events and meetings where we've had 2 or 3 residents show up. We don't have a clear marketing plan when it comes to the direction of the city. And there's so much positive things happening that I was just completely baffled and floored when we had no media outlets covering our ribbon cutting. And they just talked about it. I'm sorry, our groundbreaking. They talked about it previously, but there was no coverage, no media, no actual outlet coverage of the amazing accomplishments the city's doing. There's 3 governments in Palm Beach County that do not have a dedicated marketing team in place. And those 3 just so happen to be Riviera Beach, Belle Glade, and Pahokee. 3 of the lowest median incomes in Palm Beach County. We need to start generating revenue, and actually this department, colleagues, I think would actually allow for us to generate some revenue. Every business, which this organization has to be run as a business. We have a fiduciary responsibility to these taxpayers. And if you have nobody that's overseeing your marketing strategy, how are we advertising a community that's putting $1 billion into infrastructure and not showcasing the development we're doing? So again, colleagues, I'm a little concerned as to where our thought process is with generation of revenue, with growing our community and really building it. And if we're not intentional about it, other people will tell our story. I know Mr. Evans' focus on a lot of this presentation was about crisis management, response, POIs. We need somebody that's going to have a strategy that markets and tells the amazingness that's happening in Riviera Beach. So that's why I would actually ask colleagues if we'd be interested in supporting this position to move this forward, to incorporate this in the budget for second reading.
Mr. Chair,
Councilwoman Botel, go ahead.
thank you. I have some questions for Mr. Evans. Mr. Evans, we've spent a fair amount of money on a rebranding company that I would hope is close to providing us with the direction for the new look and feel of the city, the webpage, et cetera. Will they be doing anything to assist us in terms of creating a marketing plan around this new brand for the city of Riviera Beach? That's my first question. And then second, can the existing staff be tasked with, and you said that they were in fact creating a marketing plan, will they be rolling that marketing plan out in conjunction with the rebranding? Can they be tasked with doing some of the functions that the chair has mentioned we need?
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Mr. Evans, go ahead.
The answer to both those questions is yes. Yes, that the branding consultant, and they're working out some creative differences right now. And so something should be coming to this board shortly for consideration. But there are, in their particular experience, they do rely on your existing personnel to assist in creating for what would be a marketing and communication strategy as it relates to the rollout of what the new logo and the new brand would be. As it relates to what we have going on, I think the board would also agree that, in the duration that you've been seated here, that we've had a more robust, more active communication strategy, as well as have picked up a lot of positive PR and press concerning activities, events, and programs and the like. And that's a testament to the folks that are in that particular department. Can they be tasked with more? Yes. But obviously there is that balance from a fatigue standpoint as it relates to how much you're asking of your existing personnel, because those positions are really hard to retain folks as well as attract folks in those positions because they are in high demand.
If I could follow up, Mr.
Councilwoman
Chair.
Botel, go ahead.
So it strikes me that the existing staff has been doing an outstanding job in terms of getting things out on social media. I don't know why the press didn't show up for our wall breaking. It wasn't really a groundbreaking, it was a wall breaking event. And it's hard to say why the press doesn't show up. Maybe there was something more exciting happening in some other city that day. I don't know. It just strikes me that from my point of view, what we really need in the city is not necessarily a better storyteller, but a better story. And so I would hesitate to support a position at this level, this salary level especially. I think that we need things like somebody to do workforce. One of my big areas of concern has always been workforce development. I would rather see us spend some money, and maybe it's not even that much money, on hiring somebody to oversee workforce development, to be sure that every contract that we sign, every development that we have includes somebody being sure that that project is being worked on by local Riviera Beach people who have the skills necessary to do the work. And so I would be more inclined to support the creation of a workforce development team, if you were. Maybe it's just one person. And you mentioned that we might be having somebody come on board at the CRA who could fulfill some of those needs. But that would be a position that I would be more inclined to support. I would like to see us maybe take a look at what our existing communications staff is doing and see if we can help them with training or help them with some kind of additional support to be sure that they can perform the functions that the chair is mentioning.
Thank you, Councilwoman Botel. Comments from the board?
Yeah, I just wanted to, even though I like the idea, with two 3, 4.5 positions, which is at least about 500K. And then you're talking about a company that which we're still working with in regards to branding and marketing. That's probably at least 100K. We're talking about 600K, and that's a lot of money. And I think that with what we have, I mean, you have 4.5 positions, and they need to have a coordinated strategy of getting information out to the city. I don't know if it's a 1-person job or a 4.5-person job, but I think that what we're looking for is a coordinated strategy of getting information out to the public for the city. And with 600K, I think that should do it.
Board members? Councilman McCoy, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councilman.
Okay, so I don't understand what you have 2 full-time public information officers doing for a total of 80 staff hours per week. Is it, me personally, I subscribe to the city's social media channels, and I don't see that much pushed out to justify having 2 public information officers that wouldn't be able to encompass much of this work that's already here published. But literally, if I was to ask Ms. Grimsley what can she account for her public information officer that reports under her for the day, I mean, would I be able to get a tangible, I don't know. Mr. Evans, what can you help me with in understanding what they do on a day-to-day basis?
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Mr. Evans, go ahead.
So from a communications standpoint, and I definitely will defer to the chief to speak on if there's information concerning the PIO on the police side, but I can speak with regards to the PIO on the citywide side. So we get a lot of inquiries and information requests and follow-ups from the press. And so a lot of that is providing information for the press and being able to fulfill those requests that the press may have. Also, the creation of marketing collateral, the shooting of videos, the editing of videos, the actual production of videos, the responding to some of those inquiries. A lot of the events and programs that you all have and that the city has, those individuals are at those events taking pictures and then trying to push that information out. So it is a variety of different duties and responsibilities that is consistently and ever changing. And their workday could be planned out perfectly, and then something happened, and then they're deployed from the management of the Code Red system to sending out press releases, to writing correspondence to businesses about activities and programs, and even committees that they serve on internally to help provide some insight as it relates to communication strategies concerning items that the board wants to see us push out. So that's realistically what a day in the life of someone in that role and responsibility consists of, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair.
Councilman McCoy, go ahead.
Perhaps, Mr. Evans, you should consider having them to respond to public information requests or public records requests for elected officials, because I still am waiting on stuff from the month of May. And I don't know how you get compliance around here other than filing a lawsuit, but that's the craziest damn thing I heard, that you can get a dedicated person to respond to press, but when you got board members that's requesting information that we clearly know exists, we get it when? Next fiscal year? I mean, come on. I don't support doing a communications director. That's just where I'm at. And I think this guy, whoever he was that got up and spoke, said it best. I mean, like, what are we going to do? What is the real part of representation? I mean, anybody can get up here. We only have 2 options when it comes to voting, yes or no. Obviously, we can make suggestions or recommendations, but when it comes down to it, it's yes or no. And I don't see how that I can support a position where I don't even, I can't justifiably see that. Certainly there was a case put on by the chairperson to say why we need it, but I haven't seen, first of all, statistics other than a statement made by the chairperson. What I can tell you is, certainly we have those other 2 positions, but we just did this rebranding. I thought there was going to be additional follow-up. We're going to adopt a new logo with the branding company. It's just like we kind of seem like we get halfway and then I don't hear anything else about it. Did we even close that out, Mr. Evans?
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Councilman, go ahead, Mr. Evans.
In my communications to Councilperson Botel, that they're still working on different options to present to the board. So they're in the logo phase and going back and forth as it relates to colors And so they are close to the completion of that particular project. But also, we did ask them to come back to have additional conversations, additional charrettes, additional discussions with the community to make sure that the brand is all encompassing. And so we have asked for additional information from them and additional work from them to be able to incorporate something that we think that the board can receive and ultimately the community accept as well. So that's still ongoing, and I can provide something to the board in writing with respect to the status on that. Right now, the assistant to the city manager is managing that project.
Thank you. Board members? And to that point, we'll go on to the budget. Mr. Evans, from my understanding, I'm not hearing a consensus or support for the item. But to Councilman McCoy's points, when the board asked for feedback and information, statements made versus statistics outlining what would actually justify pros and cons would actually give us the ability to make a real decision, showing what other municipal governments are spending, maybe the dollar amount that we're spending on communications, maybe some more information besides just some general statements. A little bit more insight would be what the research I would be looking for, and the board could make a conscious decision, because any narrative with a direction of pros and cons I could formalize to determine what direction I wanted to go, versus actual facts and statistics showing what's the dollars being spending in local government, what agencies are actually providing outside hired staff versus internal staff, and possibly the price points of what's going around in other municipal governments. So, but I actually don't believe there's any consensus for it, so we can proceed to the agenda.
Chair,
Councilwoman
Just like to say-
Pro Tem, go ahead.
thing in regards to this. With the 4.5 positions, the marketing company that we have, that we're currently working with, it just seems to me that needs to be some type of coordinated plan written in regards to what's happening with the city, what's happening with the city's marketing, what's happening with the city's logo. Those are the things that you work with the current communications people for. But it seems as if these positions are just all doing all different type things, but nothing is getting done, to tell you the truth, other than Mr. Walter. But I just really want to see some type of coordinated effort where everybody who's under this auspices, this banner of communications, is coming together to do something for the city in terms of logos and branding and marketing, that kind of thing. Because with this kind of money on the table, it should happen.
And I believe that was the point. Ms. Grimsley, I love the work that she's done, and she's going to be an amazing assistant to the city manager and continue to move the city forward. But the expertise we need for this position needed oversight, so that was the reason of bringing in a director. But we can proceed, though, if we can get into the budget, because we have a lot of items to discuss. So, Mr. Evans, if we can go into general fund revenues and expenditures.
All right, at this time, I'm going to turn this part of the presentation over to Ms. Reynolds, the Assistant Finance Director, to walk the board through this particular chart. Ms. Reynolds?
Yes. The total fiscal year 2024 tentative budget, it's set at $99.655 million, an increase of $6.38 million or 6.84%. The most significant change is the property taxes that increased from 57 million to 61 million. Our utility service tax is relatively flat. Our communication service tax is relatively flat. So as you can see, the most significant change is for the property taxes. The charges for services, that comprises like the charges for parks and recreational fees, library fees, fire department fees, police department fees, the administrative fees. Those include also the fees from the enterprise service funds, fines and forfeitures. That's relatively flat, also miscellaneous revenues. So the total revenues is 99.655. And also the detail of all the revenues and expenditures are included in the tentative budget document in your binders. Moving on to general fund expenditures, the most significant department in terms of cost is the police department. Second is your general administration, and going down to the smallest department being city clerk. The significant changes from fiscal year 2023 to fiscal year 2024, it's in the general administration budget, and basically those are the costs pertaining to the debt service that we pay for on our bonds. Police increased by 2.06 million, and mostly that includes salaries and benefits and operating costs. Public Works, going down to the smaller department, Public Works had a decline of $263,000, which is mostly when we asked for budget reduction, some of the departments did come back with their budgets reduced. This is the legislative budget. So we had an increase from fiscal year 2023.
Excuse me, Ms. Reynolds, I'm sorry, if we let the record reflect, Councilman McCoy is back on the dais. Thank you. Go ahead, Ms. Reynolds.
Okay, so the fiscal year 2024 budget for the legislative for each district had an increase of $10,000. So we increased travel by $5,000 and promotional activities by $5,000 as well.
Mr. Chair,
Councilwoman Botel, go ahead.
thank you for increasing travel. I think my real question about travel was, have we taken a look at the rates? I mean, you know, we had an issue lately with breakfasts that were pretty outrageously expensive, but I think that, what do we have for breakfast? $8, $12, something like that. You can't get a cup of coffee for $12 anymore. So are we going to take a look at the?
We are.
Okay, good, thank you.
Mr. Sherman is currently working on the travel policy.
Okay, thank you very much.
The proposed staff changes for fiscal year 2024, these personnel changes are really during our budget sessions where we had discussions between the departments and the city manager and city administration, where departments would actually come in and justify why these positions are needed for their operations. And we
Mr.
all-
Chair,
Councilman McCoy, go ahead.
so do we get to talk about these at this point, or?
Yeah, please, if we can
Okay.
jump in anytime.
So
Go
I
ahead.
I wanted to ask, specifically because we didn't hear from Ms. Nguyen, and I know Mr. Evans did try to take his shot at it, but there's an additional attorney that's being requested in this budget. If we're already not fully staffed, what's the justification for asking for another one, Ms. Nguyen, at this point?
The workload, sir.
Okay, so let me back up. If we're not fully staffed, how does that necessitate an additional one? If we don't, I mean, we have 2 vacancies for attorneys currently?
We have 1 vacancy, I believe. Yes. Ms. Davis fulfilled the position that Ms. Mutombo vacated, and we still have not filled Linus' position,
Okay, so,
Ms. Busby's position.
okay, and then what's the justification? The workload is what? Increased litigation, increased demand from department heads, increased advisory for members?
Increase for,
Well, we missed you for our budget presentation to get an explanation of why you believe you need an additional attorney. So indulge me in understanding what exactly is the increase in.
no, it's not a problem. Yes, increase in litigation, increase in demands from council members, increase from departments. And you know, what sometimes people don't know is that when departments increase, For instance, if they don't have an assistant director, but they get one, or they get some positions, there are more people to do the work in those departments. Therefore, I mean, legal can't keep up because they're pushing out more work, but we still have the same number of people.
Okay, so my question is, if that's the case, I don't support a budget bringing on an additional attorney just to outsource or just to hand off cases to an outside firm. Are we going to expect that someone's going to be in-house? Because Lina almost did it all. She did land use. She even did litigation. In fact, that's how I met Lina. When she started at the city, she was on, representing the city. But, is this your desire to have an attorney that comes on to do litigation?
It is not particularly, and Lina handled smaller litigation cases like, the garnishments or sometimes foreclosures, but not even all of those. And yes, she was very helpful with all of the land use issues. I don't believe we have the budget to bring litigation in-house. Most of the time when cases go to trial, you have 2 attorneys at trial. That would be 2 additional, at least 2 litigators, and they couldn't handle all of the litigation that we have in the office. I mean, you all get the litigation reports, so you see, how voluminous the litigation is. You get it every month.
So if it's done in-house, what exactly, I just don't understand. So if an attorney is sitting in-house and they're not doing litigation, whatever the demand is that's driven by departments cannot be done by staff?
Not all of the current staff. I mean, for instance, right now, because we haven't filled Lina's position, we contract out most of the land use. And land use is a very technical field. I was speaking with a colleague at the county attorney's office. It took them a year to fill a land use position, and their salaries are much higher than ours. We don't have anyone right now to handle the employment, labor issues in-house anymore.
Right, but that seems like an HR issue. So why does, I guess I'm kind of confused, but why does legal need to be on the front end of HR issues? I mean, that's why you would hire a well-qualified HR manager or HR director. Because, I mean, literally, and goes back to the situation of if we need to go outside, then maybe we need to fix something on the inside. And I've seen that time and time again. Our first resort is to go outside, which costs us astronomical. But clearly we can't maintain a staffing complement. And I'm not trying to be critical, but just taking a critical look at perhaps it's a recruitment thing. Obviously, I got to agree, it's a wage thing in almost every department. But this is why I said 3 years ago, because I recognize the much time that I spent in that office, the things that came through, that you should have the autonomy to be able to, and I think we did address going above the minimum, Mr. Evans, right? There is that discretion in the managers. But certainly I just, it's like, it seems like deja vu that every year we sit here and talk about the same exact thing. And there's so many different positions. It's almost like, project engineers are totally new ones for me. So it's just something that I'm continually observing every budget cycle. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilman McCoy.
Mr. Chair, if I may speak briefly
Please, Mr. Evans, go ahead.
on the attorney element, that's an important position for not just city administration, but for the operational departments. Most every item that you all see goes through some variation of legal review, even if it's for the purposes of a sounding board, but it is a lot of legal assistance that is needed, from reviewing a contract to reviewing an ordinance to reviewing a resolution to providing, best ways to handle particular elements. HR utilizes legal as that sounding board to what's case law say, but what is best operational practices, and then also what does the code say. And so there's a lot of items that touch the legal department, probably just as much that touch city administration. And every agenda packet that you get conservatively, you can have anywhere between 500 to 1,500 pages, and legal in most cases reads most of that particular information. So I believe that we will become more efficient we'll become more effective, and we will be able to move some of the policy direction that this board would like to see accomplished. In conversations that I have with board members routinely, there's policies, public policies that you would like to see us research or look at or see what other agencies are doing. And so we can look at the information and get the resources, but then ultimately we draft the policy or we draft the resolution or ordinance, and then we have to work with legal to get that reviewed for legal sufficiency. And so there's a lot of back and forth, but as we start moving aggressively on some of these projects and initiatives, it does help to move some of the items forward that the board has said that there has been delays as a result of some of the staffing challenges.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Questions about personnel? If we can continue.
This is the list of departmental requests that we received to unfund certain positions that may have been vacant for several years. There is also, let me point out the Public Works. We're unfunding the 2 full-time custodian positions, unfunding the 3 part-time custodian positions, and then we're creating and reclassifying those positions as maintenance workers for the Public Works Department. And this is for the Utilities Special District, adding 3 FTEs to the Utilities Special District staff in complement. So the total net citywide personnel request changes for fiscal year 2024 totals 10 full-time equivalent positions. And the annual salary totals $687,000. And that's only the annual salary. That does not include the benefits. Okay. This is a high level of the total of the fiscal 24 tentative operating budgets. As I said before, the detail of each budget, of each fund is itemized in the budget binder that I provided earlier today. So as you can see, the general fund is the most significant operating budget at $99.655 million. We also include in here the internal service funds such as the IT fund, general insurance fund, and the fleet services fund. And also included are the enterprise fund operating funds. That concludes the operating budget presentation. Do you have any questions?
Councilman McCoy, go ahead.
Thank you. Mr. Evans, I noticed that, and this came through by email as well. So I still have issues with good companies, and this has not been resolved, and we're approaching a year now. So I guess I'm going to have to bring another action on that. But apparently, we're in the gated community, and we have dumpster service provided by the association. But we're paying $22 a month for trash. That has not been resolved. But what I did notice is I don't get a recycling bin. I don't have containerized curbside pickup. We shouldn't be charged. That's the first part. The second thing is when I go over in the neighborhoods, I realize that I think at least I know I've dealt with constituent calls about good companies electing not to pick up the trash because it may exceed the 6 cubic yards. So our department is circling back, picking up that trash, at least in the cases that I've seen. Who's paying for that ultimate disposal of that trash, Mr. Evans, and what line item is that coming out of the budget? Because I can't seem to figure out if good is contracted to do this, if we're doing this as a courtesy, ultimately it costs us to haul it and to dump it, and who bears that cost? So that's, I guess, 2 pieces.
Thank you, Councilman. Mr. Evans?
So a couple of quick answers, and then Nydia can provide the specificities as it relates to what account is charged. So the services that are provided that are separate and apart or outside of what the 6 cubic yards, the city has been going to address those issues because we have gotten, of course, like the board, copious amounts of complaints with respect to trash, waste, and debris being out there. So we have a certain amount of vegetation or bulk that is provided for in the contract. There is also monies that the city has, or fees that the city has incurred as a result of some of the disposal activities. One of the things that we have established is we do have our code compliance team as well as our solid waste monitor go out and do what we call is clean sweeps of the community. So what staff's responsibility is to go out to identify those bulk piles that are not in compliance, to make contact with said property owners, to tell them that the property is not in compliance as it relates to their bulk pickup, and they're to correct or cure or resolve that particular issue. So there is contact and conversations with residents when those problems do occur. But in most cases, we as the city incur those costs to pick up those nuisance pile. We get a lot of illegal dumping. We're working with PD to try to address that, as well as with our solid waste monitors. So that's, in a nutshell, some of the things we have. Also, we are going to facilitate a conversation with the community concerning solid waste services because we think it is good for the good company to hear from the community what are some of the concerns from a level of service standpoint. And then I have had some additional conversations with finance and staff about the issue that you brought up, councilperson, with respect to the gated communities. And so there's probably a modification that will be coming before this board for discussions. But Nydia, if you want to speak to the account that's charged for any pickups outside of what is provided for in the contract.
I'm not absolutely sure at this point how the charges, but if the work is performed by our public works staff, it would certainly be charged to the general fund public works department.
Follow up, Mr. Chair.
Councilman McCoy, go ahead.
So this is a question I would like to get a response to, after this is done. But ultimately, this creates a real issue because if they're doing this regularly, now we got a fundamental flaw in the whole entire procurement process. And I can understand why Waste Management would protest, because Waste Management understood what the actual true cost of picking up and hauling trash was. And if we're going back to do it, and then now we're turning around and paying that money, which would have probably been the difference between what Waste Management offered up compared to what Good offered up. If we're spending that money, fundamentally, we got a operational issue, a procurement issue at a minimum, and potentially a lawsuit issue, because, what I can't do is be everybody's favorite, right? And I'm okay with that, but I want to be fair in this process. And I just think if we're going back to pick up the trash, that amount that we pay for hauling, I don't know, do we haul it to SWA or do we haul it to our city barn?
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Mr. Evans, go ahead.
I believe that the disposal is handled at the Public Works campus, but the assistant city manager or the Public Works team can come up and answer that question in specificity. But to Councilperson McCoy's point, the issue is with the folks that put the trash out on the curb. If they complied with what the policy calls for, then there's no issue. And what happens is we have evictions that occur. It seems that happens every weekend. Where people throw trash, waste, debris, and all that, and then they go to certain areas that is not an identifiable property. And we have certain hot spots throughout the community that we have worked with PD to sit on, and I believe they did catch one gentleman with regards to illegal dumping. So I think it's an education component as well for the residents and specifically property owners that have attrition that occurs at their rental homes, because we get some things that, and the board has seen it, where it's not even bagged and it's put out on the curb, and it creates for that nuisance issue. If anyone from Public Works would like to speak on specificities on it.
Well, I don't want to go that deep into it right now, Mr. Evans, but I will add this. A couple other things that you said is, and I definitely don't want to get away from this. a community inspector, and I think I've seen 2 positions for community inspector on the personnel slide. I don't understand what they're out to do, because if we have code enforcement officers out there who actually have the statutory authority to be able to issue citations, and more or less their job inherently involves inspections, what exactly should we expect the difference to be? Because I would much rather put more code officers and have feet on the ground in terms of that than to have someone that's going to just be there to inspect and look and report. I mean, at least if a code officer is there and they see it, they can actually issue enforcement and citations.
If I could have the Director of Development Services, Mr. Sermons, to come up and explain the duties and responsibilities of the inspectors.
And great, while he's coming, the other thing that I noticed was I got a call from a resident one day, and they was like, well, I didn't know. I guess the question was, I didn't know that there was a limit on trash. So I guess this goes to the, who we send the actual notice to. When we decided to increase our trash rates and then provide for enforcement for being outside of that 6 cubic yards, first of all, the code officer came out and issued a citation. And when I looked up the code, that was inapplicable. The code that they referenced was completely inapplicable. And then really and truly, if it's a tenant's responsibility for the trash and the bill goes to the landlord or vice versa, I mean, how do we justify it? I think certainly I would like to see or hear, that's what the public information officers are doing, putting out information about who's responsible or making sure that ultimately the correct information gets to the end user. Because, I always get in this situation, well, how would I know that I don't get the trash bills, but yet the trash is billed on the utility bill, but the property owner gets cited if there's trash in the yard in excess of the 6 cubic yards. So I think you have some disparate treatment on how that's even recognized from the first start.
Chair.
And to that point, I believe that we're getting a little bit further away, because this is definitely affecting and impacting our budget. And we have to dive a little deeper into how this contract is impacting, or the dollars we're spending. We're almost a year in and we really don't have any clear overview. I think some policy has changed and our residents haven't been properly notified. I think we've discussed, Ms. Jacobs been trying to work with the good company to schedule an all about trash conversation with the community. And I do think this needs to be an agenda item to discuss more in depth as to how operations are running. And I don't want us to get too deep into this tonight, Councilman. I think that your question and concern is relevant based upon where these dollars are coming from that we're spending. But if we can just stick to that with the expenditures for the budget, and then Mr. Evans, if you can make this a discussion item for us as soon as possible, because I think we need to address this concern immediately.
Mr. Chair, if I may, with regards to the notification, Ms. Jacobs is going to sit in Director Sermons' stead, but she can provide some information with regards to that, because she did work with the communications team to put out a communications piece associated with what 6 cubic yards look like, trash days and the like. And so, Ms. Jacobs, if you can speak to both the community inspector as well as the solid waste question.
And to that point, Councilman, would we be inclined to hearing this at a discussion item in reference to the notices in regards to how our residents are being impacted? Because Ms. Jacobs is scheduling an all about trash conversation with the good company, but going deep into this trash conversation, I think we should stick to our budget items tonight. And if we can bring this back at a sooner than later date to discuss a little bit more in depth about the contract. Thank you, Councilman McCoy. Pro Tem.
Yeah, just quickly, we talk about the residents and we talk about the good company, but this is squarely on the face of who negotiated that contract. That is where this needs to start. How it was negotiated, who negotiated, and why did it get negotiated that way? Because this is what's happening here, so we can move on, but that's where it needs to start.
And I do agree. I want clarity on how that contract was negotiated, what happened, but let's go deeper into that when we have this discussion. Councilman McCoy, if that's okay, to kind of really bring this as an item as soon as possible, because we want to get some clarity. Right now, we're a year into this contract, and expenditures that are going out are exceeding what the contract was negotiating. So we want to understand, where do we go? And then what is the marketing strategy? There's that word marketing that's going to go to our residents. How do we advise them as to what amount of dumping they can do and why did it change? And then what's going to be the impact to our bottom line, our bottom dollar. So if we can't move forward with it, we'll bring this back as a later date, Mr. Evans.
So, Mr. Chair, if you'd like, I can speak briefly in response to some of the comments that were made by Mr. McCoy.
Well, actually, no, if we can bring that back later.
Okay.
I think Mr. McCoy, in regards to the budget tonight, is concerned about where these dollars that we're spending on the dumping is coming from, and that will be a budgeted item. If we can talk about your concern, prepare actual presentation so that the whole board can, inquire about the concerns later. Thank you.
Sure, thank you. But the Let's Talk Trash event, it has been established for October the 3rd.
October 3rd, and that's a community conversation?
Yes,
Thank you. October 3rd?
yes.
Do we have any publications or notifications to the residents yet?
What we did is there was a PR piece that was developed. We discussed it today and agreed that once we went over it and reviewed it, that it would go out by no later than September 21st.
And Councilman McCoy, if we can have that community conversation, and then once we get some feedback from the community, we can incorporate that with the rest. Councilman McCoy, go ahead.
Very briefly, Ms. Jacobs, are you equipped to explain the difference between a community inspector and a compliance officer?
So actually, I'm not to any great extent, other than we established those community inspector positions once we received those CDBG dollars from the county, and we felt that we would do it sort of like in collaboration with what was happening over at the CRA. So they would be equivalent to what the CRA would have as ambassadors. We would have community inspectors on the city side. So we didn't go as deep as using those particular dollars per se for community. We used them for community inspectors as opposed to code enforcement officers.
Yeah, thank you. I get that, but I have not seen why we need a community inspector that can't already be captured in a compliance officer that's already there. What we don't have is enough compliance officers. And I told, I'm hard pressed to support a budget, especially when I know that I really see that there are needs to address some of the other issues. If code compliance is not out here on Saturday and Sundays, then what happens? I'm gonna make an announcement. If you want to come here and dump in the city, let's do it on Sundays, because we know, everybody knows there's nobody working on Sundays. So how do we address that? This is the beacon that we should be able to address that. I've contacted both you, Mr. Evans, and Miss McBride, probably even the city attorney, about violations that I see that occur over the weekend, and it's just like free reign. And it's like, dump that somewhere else, but don't do it here. And it's just like, what happens? Now, on Monday when we arrive, now we got a whole cluster, and I got complaints that's just coming everywhere. But if we had someone dedicated or had staggered schedules, like, I want to hear something innovative, how we address these issues. I've even went so far to call the police chief. I'm just like, if you go to Wawa and you see the stuff that happens at Wawa, the parking lot is full of trash. I'm like, I don't even want to pay for gas here. Public Storage, which is in unincorporated Palm Beach County, their hedges are encroaching on the sidewalk. So when I run down Blue Heron Boulevard to exercise, I'm literally about 3 feet from the roadway because their hedges is so far over. So help me understand why we need community inspectors. Really, I just need somebody to get it done. It'd be great if they had enforcement arm, because just having someone out there to try to address the issues of pick up trash, that's nice. That's great. I appreciate it. But we really need to be able to address some of these violations that are so blatant that people seem to, do because they know no one's watching. The construction on holidays. I was there on Juneteenth, which I found in the code and shared with you. Like, why is somebody doing heavy construction, on a holiday? Why is my neighbor doing his floor at 8 p.m. at night? It's like, these are the kind of issues that me as an elected official, for me to support a budget, I want to see that we're getting, we're addressing that. That's all I have, Mr. Chair. Thank you for indulging me. Thank you, Ms.
So
Jacobs.
it's okay, understood. And
Go
there
ahead, Ms.
are,
Jacobs.
I'm sorry, it's okay. There are code enforcement inspectors that work on Saturdays, Mr. McCoy.
Mr. Chair, if I
Please, Mr. Evans, go ahead.
provide additional clarity. We also discussed that as part of Director Sermon's budget presentation, that the new inspectors that would come on board would have a staggered schedule so that we would pick up the coverage on Sundays and the weekdays and the weekends and the holidays and what have you, because we would codify that in their job description so they know right off the bat when they do come to work for the agency what the expectations are. So we will have 365 coverage if these positions are provided for.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. And thank you, Ms. Jacobs, for filling in and answering the concerns. If we can continue with the budget.
The, this is the city's citywide capital projects plan for fiscal year 2024 through 2028.
And Ms. Reynolds, if you could just bring the whole machine a little closer and maybe just slide the laptop over one, it'll just help a little bit with picking you up.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Reynolds.
Okay. These are projects that are in progress. The detail of all the projects are included in the binder that provides like the description, the location, the funding source. And it also provides you with the amount that's in progress and the 5-year cash outflow for each one of these projects. For city administration, there are basically no new projects for city administration. They're really projects that are in progress. One significant change is Project 23018, which is the Neighborhood Revitalization Program, where we added an additional $5 million starting in fiscal year 2024 through 2028. Development services, they're all projects that are in progress. There are no new projects for development services. Fire, all existing projects. Fire Station 86, we hope that will come on stream in fiscal year 2025. So that's a new project for the fire department, which is Fire Station 86.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Mr. Evans, go ahead.
And Chief Kurt, if you can join us at the podium. The chief and I have had some conversations that I think are germane to this conversation because there may be a situation whereby we have more robust discussions with the board about amending the CIP concerning the lead time associated with apparatus and some of the challenges that supply chain issues have provided. So Chief Kurt, if you can provide the board with an explanation concerning the discussion that we had.
Welcome, Mr. Kurt. Welcome, Chief.
Thank you. Chair, Council, Mayor, Mr. Manager. So we had a brief discussion during these budget presentations on what we're looking at as far as lead times for apparatus. One of the things that we did as soon as we got out of that meeting is we began speaking to the builders of fire engines and or ambulances or rescue trucks. And we're finding that it's going to take a minimum of 44 months for delivery of a new engine. I provided some of the council members with information as it relates to the hour usage that was requested, some of the mileages that were requested. So the situation that we're in is the order needs to be placed as soon as possible over the next year, 2, and 3, so that in year 4, 5, and 6 from now, we start receiving delivery of those apparatus, at which time our older apparatus will be clearly at their end of life. And this is something that has grown exponentially within the last year. We were looking at 24 months, then it quickly went to 36 months, and then now it's at 44 months. We're even dealing with situations with some of our rescue trucks, part of our remount program, where just to buy chassis, Freightliner only takes a certain number of orders a year, and they take no more orders. You'll have to wait another year before you can even try to get in line to order a new chassis. So I'm going to be working really closely with finance and the city manager to prepare something for council on what I think a long-term plan is going to be. Because the one thing I don't ever want to do is when my time is up and I leave this organization, leave it in a bad way where we have trucks that are breaking down and not able to respond to the calls.
Thank you, Chief Kurt.
Yes, sir.
Go ahead, Mr. Evans or Ms. Nydia.
The next, Parks and Recreation, as maybe the past 2 months, we amended the CIP to include Inlet Grove and the Dan Calloway Park improvements. So that's one change we had during fiscal year 2023. And also the projects through the Parks Master Plan. Those projects were added during this fiscal year, so they're all new projects going into fiscal year 2024 and beyond. We also added a project, which is the park's portable stage, which that will be acquired during fiscal year 2024.
Mr. Evans, the Inlet Grove, we moved on our capital improvement plan. If the bond, do we have to vote this out if the bond does not pass, or if the ground the ground lease is not negotiated with the school district? What's our plan with this project? Are we just gonna have to vote this out? Or we have to change our CIP again? What steps are we taking?
Mr. Chair, if I
Please.
may.
Please.
If any of the capital projects associated with the bond are not successful, then we would have to have a discussion with the board to amend the capital plan and shift and move these particular projects accordingly. So
What would be the discussion at that time? It would just be to vote it out, move it out, to roll it out over a certain period of time? What is our vision? Because I know we're banking on it passing and us negotiating terms of the lease, but what options do we have before we vote on this?
Mr. Chair, at this particular time, that's a more, detailed conversation with respect to, what are the options that are provided for the board should any of the bond initiatives not be successful? Because as communicated, you do have limited bond capacity to the tune of about $55 million. And so there would be a situation where you would have to look to prioritize said capital projects and then look at your entire CIP and see what the board's priorities may be if any of those three projects are not successful. So it would be a pretty lengthy conversation about where the board wants to move these and how they would look to fund any of these projects.
So we're proceeding with the capital projects with the intent that the bonds will pass in March, and then that will negotiate the terms for the inlet and parcels.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Evans.
our intent is to inform and educate the community concerning the bond initiatives and what the factual information and the impacts are as a result of those particular items. Should they be successful, obviously there'll be more conversations with the board. Should they not be successful, then we would probably have to have more of a workshop discussion about what the next steps are and where the board wants to move forward collectively concerning your capital improvement plan. But our hope is just to educate and inform the residents and make sure they make an informed decision at the ballot box.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Reynolds, if you continue, please.
The next department, Police Department, again, $35 million for the public safety building, the police facility. That item was added during fiscal year 2023. And again, that's a project that's going to be reliant on the GO bonds issuance. We also have a new project for the police department, which is the Police Mobile Command Center for acquisition during fiscal year 2024. The police department did acquire grant funding to purchase this unit. Okay, this is the Public Works Department capital projects. These projects on these sheets are really projects that are in progress, and we just hope to continue completing the project in later fiscal years. All right, for Public Works, we added 2 new projects for fiscal year 2024. One, the light relocation on North Ocean Boulevard, and the mill and overlay reconstruction of Military Trail. That's budgeted for fiscal year, to commence in fiscal year 2024. All these other projects really are ongoing projects that we have. 22nd Avenue and 25th Avenue, those are new projects for fiscal year 2024. But I do believe those 2 funding sources were reliant on the project for Safe Harbor. So we may have to look in probably amending the capital project plan to remove those 2 items. And that concludes the projects for the on the governmental side.
Do have a question about you said the safe harbor, the 22nd through 25th. I see that we've moved that up to the CIP for 2024. If you could give some more insight as to what do you mean by we'd have to remove it? So if the safe harbor project doesn't go through, we would be moving those where?
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Ms. Evans, go ahead.
With respect to that particular item that's provided for in the CIP, it was anticipated that any revenue generated as a result of that particular project would be utilized and reinvested in the community for the purposes of addressing some of the roadway infrastructure and some of the drainage infrastructure. Based on the recent decision of the board, if this particular item is no longer off the board before your second and final reading of the budget, we would amend that and remove the funding from that particular line item and then rebalance the capital improvements plan. So we would, and then keep the project still in there, but then look to maybe provide for funding out in the out years.
Do we have an idea of like time frame when you say the out years? Because I think the biggest concern was that our residents in that community have been really wanting to see those roads and have the infrastructure addressed. But when you say the out years, what time frame are we looking like?
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Please.
That would depend on funding that we have available. The board knows that we're at the ending of the Worst First program that looks at all our roadway infrastructure and grades the condition of our roadway infrastructure. So once that analysis is provided, then all the roadway projects will be inserted into the capital improvement plan and then be prioritized based on their condition. As it relates to where these particular roadways stand in the overall program, I can't speak to great specificity on that at this particular moment, but at least you're talking about, FY 2026, 2027 is probably where you may have these projects come to fruition. Could be earlier, but conservatively, that would probably be where it would land.
So I guess that's confusing. If we were going to prioritize those roadways, we only moved that up to, I guess, utilizing impact fees. And I think we've had meetings and agenda review where you said impact fees from this project would go directly into the neighborhoods directly impacted. So are these dollars from those impact fees or because obviously if we've prioritized these roads, then this is being moved up only because of that project?
So, Mr. Chair, if I may.
Please.
You can see the funding or the capital stack for these roadways is $475,000 from gas tax, $1 million from capital improvements fund, and then $863,000 from impact fees. So that is where that's the variety of money that would be brought to this particular project. If those funds are not available, obviously it then impedes our ability to move forward with that particular project.
And what is the total amount of impact fees that would be generated? Because I'm assuming that's coming directly from that project, because that was another question. I actually had a resident making sure that the impact fees would all be going into that community, or they can be spread throughout the city.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Ms. Evans.
I can't at this particular moment, and that's something that we can tell you the exact amount as it relates to the impact fees, but I know that $683,000 is the impact fees that will be utilized for the purposes of this particular project. But I can't give you the specificity, and unfortunately, Director Sermons is not here right now to be able to give me the breakdown. I don't know if Ms. Reynolds has that information.
I just want to see what prioritize. I just want to make sure that we're clear with how these decisions are made, because the impact fees and the amount of the impact fee, and understanding if this project doesn't go through, that this will come out of the CIP. So, Mr. Councilman McCoy, go ahead.
Thank you. That's really clever. I don't know what we're talking about if that was already disposed of by the board. So unless there's some desire to reintroduce this issue, I mean, it's still our obligation to provide for streets and roads and the maintenance and modernization of these infrastructure activities. But I don't know how we would book something on the capital plan that's not even certain. So that shouldn't even be up there in the first place. And it's not even, it was very much remote. The possibility of having that was remote, so I don't see how we could have possibly put this on a plan, Mr. Evans. Can you explain that?
Mr. Chair, if I may.
And to that point, just to, I guess, address that sentiment, that was a discussion because I've been having meetings with residents and with staff. So that was actually a conversation too.
That's not, I'm asking Mr. Evans.
I understand, but you
Well, let
made,
him
you made a
finish
reference.
then, because I'm trying to figure out how do you bank on a proposed development that's not, I mean, this never occurred before, Mr. Chair. And I would like to have an answer from the manager. Because, and I got a couple other questions that I want to bring up about this whole entire budget being brought to us all together, but I don't understand how we can bank on something that's not even possible when clearly the board has already taken action on it. And I don't recall seeing this. I remember seeing this discussion in earlier slides, but to book it into the fiscal year, clearly that should have been taken out before we even got here.
And I agree. I will let Mr. Evans go ahead and speak and reserve my comments for his completion, sir. Go ahead, Mr. Evans.
Mr. Chair and members of the board, this is the capital improvements plan. You have projects in here that, based on staff's analysis, that these are projects that we believe, and with conversations with the city council, because a lot of these projects have been on the books for well over 5+ years, because every year it moves up. So for instance, the police station, we modified the capital improvements plan to incorporate the police station. There's no funding that's provided for it. We're going to have the conversation with the voters, and if the voters vote in the affirmative, then that particular project has funding and now has moved up. So there are multiple projects in here that sometimes go forward, sometimes don't go forward, sometimes it's the will of the board to change or reprioritize a project. But these are the projects that we put forth. So it is very common if you look back to all your capital improvement plans, where we have identified projects as a result of where we anticipate future growth or future redevelopment activities. If the board looks to move these items out of the budget or reposition that's what the conversation at your budget workshops are for. But it is very common to have items in your budget that are futuristic and looking forward. That's why it's a 5-year plan.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Councilman McCoy, go ahead.
Mr. Evans, thank you, Mr. Chair. So considering, I don't know where we are now unless there's something that I haven't been privy to, but at this point, this was disposed of. So do we intend on updating this capital plan to reflect the new funding source?
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Mr. Evans, go ahead.
Yes, our intent is before it comes back to you in second and final reading on the 20th, that project will be either zeroed out or repositioned in the specific out years.
Okay. Well, I'll save my other comments regarding the presentation of this. Thank you.
Thank you. And I will use the reserved time to address that. I acknowledge this being in the budget because I was confused with it being disposed of, as you said, Councilman McCoy. So I guess not being privy, I can say that I would like for us to have this discussion next week because this is in the budget. So if we want to have this removed, we can definitely have this removed. But at the end of the meeting, I will be reserving the time to ask for a special meeting to discuss the items because these are going to be the impacted items that affect the residents of that community and that project. So we can discuss that during my actual comments at the end of the meeting. So that's why I actually addressed this because I'm concerned as to why this is in here if we dispose of that item. But as you stated, right now, if Mr. Evans were going to pull this, it would need to be pulled from the final reading, which would be on what date? Mr. Evans?
September 20th.
So we would pull these items from that reading or reassess them because as Councilman McCoy said, we have a responsibility to that residency, but we've prioritized these roads. I want to see where we've prioritized, where the roads need to be impacted. And if we don't generate revenue from impact fees, then what level do they fall? So this is a deeper conversation that I agree with you, Councilman McCoy, but that's the reason I brought it up. So I'm not sure if there was a difference of opinion or misunderstanding, but I wanted to be clear why it was being brought up. Mr. Evans, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, if I may, when we submitted the budget to the board for consideration, those projects and initiatives were enumerated in the budget document. We're not going to change and deviate from what has been published and what has been provided for in the budget document without the conversations with the board. The conversations that we've had with the board concerning our budget sessions, we have gone through the capital improvements plan. So it is no late add or addition or what have you. This is the same document that we have been working off of. And so the board most recently made that decision. I just communicated that we will remove it on the 20th for your second and final reading, but we didn't want to make that change until it was in a public setting and to the discussion to occur as a result of the project. So I just want to make sure that there's clarity provided. It's not that this project was added or this was moved around. This has been in the capital improvements plan. And when we knew of the intent behind the developer coming into that particular space, there was multiple conversations that occurred about the possibility of reinvesting those monies into the neighborhood, because I think we all have gotten calls or emails or communications from that neighborhood with respect to the condition of the roadway. So this was also in response to the complaints that we heard from the neighborhoods to try to resolve some of the issues with respect to the conditions of their roadway and their infrastructure.
And thank you for clarifying that. I guess this is where we give the direction, colleagues, for what we want to see with these items. Because if this project, as Councilman McCoy stated, has been disposed of, we need to give staff the direction to have this removed. And if that's the direction we're giving, then we need to have this removed, or we need to have it brought back to us in a timely fashion to see what span of years we will be addressing that neighborhood. So that was the intent of bringing it up, Councilman McCoy. I wouldn't want there to be a consideration of any type of idea, something being held back or some nefarious plot. It was to understand, what are we going to do with this item that has to be addressed before our final reading. Any other comments, board members?
Yes.
Councilman McCoy, go ahead.
Thank you. So I specifically had communications going back from late July regarding the citywide assessment we were doing on milling and paving and the whole citywide assessment. And clearly there were things that were located in the northwest section of the city in District 1 that were listed as, and I have it here, serious. And in fact, I think there was 2 cases of it being serious. So I'm just trying to figure out, how do I have streets that had no drainage whatsoever, that was literally on the PCI scale, much worse than this, placed into the capital projects plan before, over on the western side where they have flooding issues as well?
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Mr. Evans, please.
With respect to the prioritization and how the funding was provided on these roadways, is that there was a funding source that was identified as it relates to the impact that is derived from the proposed development. That's why those particular projects were placed in a priority status to be funded, because there was capital that was available. What we are, and actually I'm working on an email now to staff as it relates to state appropriations to request that they go after roadway infrastructure to address some of the roadway issues that we have in our community. At your budget workshop, we communicated that there's $100 million worth of roadway projects in our city. And on that scale, a large number of those roadway projects are in very poor condition. And so if the ballot initiatives are successful, our intent from the staff perspective is really focusing on the roadway infrastructure and the roadway network throughout the city. And how do we look to find what are different funding sources to be able to address that? So that is a priority for us to look at our roadways holistically. But now we're going to be completing the assessment on the wastewater and water infrastructure. So we'll have the condition of the pavement, the water, as well as wastewater and stormwater. So we'll be able to give an actual rating as it relates to the conditions of the roadway, and then moving forward with a pavement plan that looks to address roadways throughout the city. So that is a big push for us, and hopefully something that we can get some assistance from the state or any infrastructure monies from the federal government. But that is one of the directives that I'm going to be providing the staff to try to get some monies this next legislative session.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Board members? Okay, if we can continue. Ms. Reynolds?
These last few sheets are going to discuss the enterprise funds projects. The marina projects that we have, they're funded through the FIND grant. We have 4 projects still in progress, and we also have, going forward, the marina phase 3 expansion from fiscal year 2024 through 2028. And though that expansion will be funded through the fine grants as well. Going into the utility special district, these are all projects that are currently in progress. There's no change in terms of funding, just for us to complete these projects. Again, these are all same existing projects that are currently underway. And we have 4 new projects: the lift station number 16 rehabilitation, and the lift station panel replacement, lift station can upgrade, lift station control panels. And these are all grant projects. Grants, we're hoping to be awarded the grants to fund these 4 projects in fiscal year 2024. And that concludes the presentation for the Utility Special District and the 5-year capital plan.
Thank you, Ms. Reynolds. And board members, we can go back into some questions. The time is now 7:45. Do we want to go ahead and start public comments and come back to presentations? Or how do we want to proceed? Public comments is okay? All right, we're going to go into public comments. And then, Ms. Reynolds, after we return, we're going to go back into what part of the presentation?
We're done.
We're done with the presentation?
Thank you.
Colleagues, do we want to go ahead and dispose?
Could I ask a quick question? Ms.
Please.
Reynolds? Please. In the back part of this binder, there's a capital improvement plan document. I can't find it in the backup, and I can't find it on the webpage. Where would I get a hold of a digital copy of this?
Oh, it's not posted as yet.
Oh, that's why I can't find it.
So
When do
we're
you-
done.
When do you think it might be posted? Or could
Tomorrow.
you send it? All right, good. I can wait that long. Thank you.
I'm sorry, Madam Clerk, do we have any public comments for this item?
For item 9B, no, but the mayor has left the dais.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And 9B, we have no public comments.
No.
Board, do we want to go ahead and dispose of 9B before we go to public comment?
Yes.
Okay. Any more questions from the board?
Yeah, I just want to put this out. So, Mr. Evans, I
Councilman
was
McCoy.
looking at specifically the budget item on the agenda, and listed here is it's referred to in your cover page, well, in Mr. Sherman's cover page, which I particularly find that in contrary to the charter, because the charter specifically provides that the manager is supposed to bring forth the budget. So certainly, you know, you have here Mr. Sherman's listed for all these items, but I think certainly the memorandum should formally address that's consistent with your duties under the charter. And I just wanted to bring that up because that was an observation that I noticed. Because he's certainly not here to address that, and this is a charter responsibility, Mr. Evans.
Mr. Chair, if I may, with respect to the charter provision in there, I believe the charter provision says that I have to present the budget to the board no later than the 31st of July, I believe. And so staff has provided the budget, and we have been doing it in this particular format since I've been here. And it's a co-presentation for the purposes of going, Mr. Sherman has and Ms. Nydia have more specificities behind the numbers, and operationally, I have the other side. That's why all the departments are here to provide. So it's definitely a collaborative effort. It's a $176 million budget. So it is a pretty robust document and a lot of work. But with respect to the charter, I think it's specific to when the budget and the manager has to present the budget to the board.
Okay, so I'm gonna follow up.
Go ahead, Councilman.
And I appreciate that, and that's exactly what I'm saying. This says from Randy Sherman, Director of Finance and Administrative Services. What I'm saying to you in the memo, this should be coming from the city manager instead of the finance director.
Mr. Chair, we can certainly make that modification.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Councilman McCoy?
Here again, I'm afraid that I'm not going to be able to support the operations budget. I'm really holding out some hope for the capital budget, but you know, here again, we have the same issues, and I just don't see how we find ourselves in this situation 12 years later, where we have no different than the gentleman got up and stated time and time again, we've been faced with issues that are completely on its face, legally and factually and even morally wrong, to sit here and send Waste Management on their way because they didn't have a competitive bid. But in turn, we turned around and started picking up the trash and let good companies charge us the difference. This is stuff that doesn't really make sense. And this is why we probably have to have 4 and 5 attorneys to defend when we make missteps. And I don't expect perfection. I expect people to come in and do their best effort because mistakes happen. We're all human. But I just don't see how we can continue to, in my situation, be charged $22 a month times 500 residents. That's over $10,000 that the city gets illegally every single year. So like, this is the kind of stuff that bothers the heck out of me. But if nobody says nothing, then it's not a problem. So this is why I won't be able to support a budget. And, you know, that's it, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilman. Madam Clerk?
You want me to call the roll?
No public comments for item 9B
No.
and no further discussion from my colleagues?
No.
Madam Clerk?
Councilperson Botel?
Yes.
Councilperson Miller Anderson?
Yes.
Councilperson McCoy?
No.
Chair Pro Tem Lanier?
Yes.
Chairperson Lawson?
No.
That vote passes 3-2 with Councilperson McCoy and Chairperson Lawson dissenting.
Thank you, Madam Clerk.
I object.
Public,
I object to legal sufficiency.
thank you, Councilman McCoy. Public comment shall begin at 7:30 unless there's no further business of the city council, which in the event it shall begin sooner. In addition, if any item is being considered at 7:30, then comments from the public shall begin immediately after the item has concluded. Please be reminded the city council board has adopted rules of decorum governing public comment conduct during official meetings, which has been posted at the front desk. In an effort to preserve order, if the rules are not adhered to, the city council chairperson may have any disruptive speaker or attendee removed from the podium, the meeting, or the building. Please govern yourselves accordingly. Madam Clerk, if we can go into public comment, please.
Mr. Chair, the acceptance of public comment cards are now closed. First, we will have Mr. Lloyd Brown, followed by Ms. Brandy Davis Balsamo.
Thank you, Madam
Mr.
Clerk.
Lloyd.
Welcome, Mr. Brown.
How you doing? My name is Lloyd Brown, and you know what? It was one point that Charlie got on about, you know, the code enforcement or whatever, but like Hollandale having a problem, like with these people putting these RVs in their yard and put a fence around it. I mean, so that means it's permanent. But what they were doing in Hollandale, they were renting them out to illegal people who are in the United States, and they were charging them another fee. So how can you let that happen? I mean, the code enforcement, like he was saying, these people were working around my house. It was 7 o'clock at night. They came there 7 in the morning. The lady across the street, she worked at night, all night. Miss Ruff, my neighbor, she's old. They said, well, we talked to her. Okay, that doesn't mean anything. How can we let these people come in? Okay, and then too, these food trucks, they starting to appear everywhere. I mean, they sell enough food out of these corner stores, and now you got food trucks, and the code enforcement told me that these food trucks have to be moved overnight, which I think, I mean, I haven't seen them move. The one on Silver Beach Road and the one over here by the Shell, I guess is a Shell. I ain't been there in a while. But another thing I want to say is, I can see real clear right now. You know, my air conditioner went out. And for years and years, I was wondering what it was. I thought it was mold or whatever. But like the building inspector came out there and me and him looked up in the ceiling. And there was a piece of stuff left up in the ceiling. But he was steady telling me that they did inspections. So, okay, you telling me if you do inspections and you come there, all that waste material is supposed to be removed. So what in the hell is doing up in there 10 years from the time? That means nobody did no inspections. And then he was saying, well, it's a shabby job. You know, whoever did the job over here, my windows won't go up. My eyes, I'm telling you, they were bad. They clearing up now. The windows won't go up on the toilets, on the little knobs and everything. I don't know if it's Chinese drywall or whatever, but this is what get the whole thing. When I told him who did the work, he was bragging about these people. I said, Mercurial Construction did the work. He choked. Oh, they do a good job. But then he told me the job that was done was a shabby job because he didn't know they done the work. So, I mean, who you trying to bullshit? Excuse my language. It wasn't no job done. It wasn't no job, no inspection. Lady March told me that. So I want y'all to investigate that, because if I go blind because of something that y'all didn't let do, I mean, maybe it wasn't your council, so don't cut me off. Maybe it wasn't you people, but still, it's a part of Riviera Beach. And I mean, 10 years I've been there.
Thank you,
And
Mr.
for
Brown.
9 of them, let me tell you,
Thank
I
you for your
can't even
comments, Mr.
see.
Brown. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, before we move to the next speaker, I need the record to reflect that at 7:52, Chairperson Lawson left and returned at 7:54, and the mayor returned at 7:53.
Thank you, Madam Clerk.
No problem.
Next speaker, Ms. Brandy.
Yep.
Evening, everyone. I withdraw my comment card, so I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Brandy.
Mr. Travis Bethea. And then Ms. Logson.
Welcome, Mr. Travis.
Thank you. Thank you. Good evening, council. Travis Bethea, 37 East 24th Street, 19-year resident. I want to thank the council for agreeing with Lakeview Park on the vote, the 3-2 vote. Thank you very much. Very appreciated. Everyone should pat themselves on the back. I don't want to see our 80 residents traded out for 80 jobs, okay? I know everyone's concerned about jobs. Everyone in the city, we live here. A lot of us work here. We pay our taxes. My main concern is our safety in the neighborhood. I want to just end it with part of our civil rights is the right to life, liberty, property, and the pursuit of happiness. That's what we're looking for. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Travis.
Ms. Julie Logson, and then Mr. Howard Clark, the third.
Welcome, Ms. Julie.
Hello, good evening, council members. I too just wanted to thank you all for supporting the community and our demands in the vote last week. And I want you to know that we count on your continued support because this should not be a win just for the city of Riviera. It should be a benefit to the area that's getting impacted the most. On another topic, which isn't what I came here for, but as long as I listened to all of this, Mr. McCoy, your comment with regard to we need to run things like a business. I mean, I haven't been in this community that long, but I have worked as a CFO for a major corporation and spent 20 years in finance. And I will tell you, you guys are dealing with a pretty significant budget. And your job is to make sure that the taxpayers' dollars are well spent. And if you're not seeing your finance department basically going through a very formal budget process, department by department, with metrics comparing headcount in the city to the headcount that you have on your staff, to the dollars you're spending per person, and comparing yourselves to West Palm, to Palm Beach Gardens, to Jupiter, to other counties, I would like to see that as a taxpayer, because I think we spend a lot of money and a lot of money on staffing here that I'm not sure we're getting the results we should be getting. And I know that I, for one, would much rather have quality of water, not have my water bill going up, and have my roadways repaired than a brand new $100 million city hall. So, I encourage that you make sure you're doing the right due diligence on your budget process, and I would volunteer to help if you need it. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Ms. Julie.
Mr. Howard Clark, and then Ms. Mary Brown.
Welcome, Mr. Clark.
Good evening. My name is Howard Clark with the law office of Robert N. Hartzell, representing Ms. Balsamo. We were here to speak on the safe harbor reconsideration. Would this be the appropriate time?
You can speak on any comments. Go ahead, Ms. Clark.
Okay, so we're asking if there is a reconsideration tonight, we're asking for the denial of that reconsideration. Last week, this same commission denied that project. The vision of the downtown corridor in 2013 was memorialized within the comprehensive plan of the city of Riviera Beach. Walkable, shoppable, vibrant, and exciting downtown area. This project, if reconsidered, would not provide those things. whether the business or residents living adjacent to the safe harbor property, all have relied on the cities to follow their word and the comprehensive plan. That's to make that area shoppable, walkable, vibrant, and exciting. This project would not do that. So with that being considered, I would ask that you deny any reconsideration for that project. Safe Harbor refused to entertain any of the concerns brought to them by the residents of Riviera Beach. They likewise refused to adjust their expansion scheme to be compatible with the comprehensive plan that enshrines the commission's vision of the downtown project. And just last week, again, to reiterate, the commission, this very commission, denied that project. So I'm asking for no consideration to be considered. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Ms. Mary Bram and Mr. Peter Harupa.
Welcome, Ms. Brown.
Thank you. Good evening to the chair as well as the council board. I'm gonna make some highlights here. Marketing in any city is diverse. It is a revolving position, whereas those that are in communication, they are here and they are there, but they also are diverse in their skill setting. They are not catered to just one individual. They must utilize their skill set and the services that they will render in every capacity of any city. And we are no different. Our marketing, it will require that type of skill set, that type of diversity. So I would like for you all to keep that in mind. The Gould Company, it is enough blame to go around, but we are in this moment here. It is we as a government execute what we have agreed upon to make it work. No one tells us what they want, regardless of the contract or not. We execute it and we bring that accountability, and we expect for them to do the same thing. So it is enough blame to go around with the Gould contract. And if the ball has dropped, we all are responsible for that ball there. But we must bring accountability to this company here, because Ms. Bram has had tremendous concerns about it. But I'm not going to speak in reference to that, because I believe as a city that we can clean it up. I did attend the ceremony over at the fire department, but I thought it was 11:30 and it was 10:30. So I got there afterwards. So I just want that to go on record as well. Our infrastructure in our city has always been bad. We know that. Come on, board. Your capital projects, they're important. We must do these things while we have a chance to do that. Regardless where we're at here in this setting or not, we still have to move. And these things are critical for the city. If we are to rebrand ourselves, we must take on that new look. And we must think out of the box in order to meet our accommodations. So you as a board here, get out of that sandbox.
Thank you for your comments, Ms. Brown.
Mr. Peter and then Ms. Dolores Williams.
Welcome, Ms. Peter.
Thank you, fellow commissioners, staff, Peter Ruda, resident, contractor, business person. 176 million. Sitting back there reviewing the budget, just curious to throw out there, and I'm sure I'll get a response, as to how long the board gets to review these topics and budgets prior to the meeting. It seems it's a 4-year projected budget. I understand that. And July is, I guess, where the thing comes in and is due to be presented. The numbers are staggering. First of all, the budget overview, I couldn't see it, and I wear glasses, just saying, FYI, can we increase that for future? Design, $100,000 increase for design. Not sure what design indicates, but it's a line item on the budget. Property and parks, it's a $125,000 increase. I agree, we definitely need it. Didn't like that the fire station took over that particular parcel. It infects wells. I used to box at wells when I was a little guy. I think it could have been moved, but that's my opinion. It's water under the bridge. Travel was reduced, but the increase in per diem, you increased the per diem, which not understanding if you decrease travel, how do you increase the per diem? And there's a line item for unemployment. I'm not sure what that entails or why there's a unemployment and what does it include. And as far as the attorneys, I just would say, prior to my previous resident saying that, we should look into some of these line items as a staff, as a committee, as to how we can improve these things. If not, delete them and bring someone else in to do a better job, not a better job, but maybe improve productivity, time frames, produce more work. There are bigger law firms out there. There are other people that produce equipment, rental equipment, that maybe decrease our budget numbers. But I'm happy as a resident to contribute, but please kind of look at these items and try to decrease them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Peter.
Ms. Dolores Williams.
I haven't been here in a while to the council meeting, but I do honor the chairman, the mayor, all of you here and the citizen of Riviera Beach. I had a nephew that was very, very ill. Something happened. And I just want to put this in about this. I don't know if any of you know, they're called Select Specialty Hospital. It's not a nursing home, but it's a special thing that helps people that's on the trach, breathing machine. It is an awesome, clean hospital. If you need information, I can get there. If you need someone that's already in a nursing home, need to be moved from there, please take them there. They don't have the nurses, the publicists, or nobody standing around just talking instead of taking care of patients. It's called Select Specialty Hospital. It's located on Metalucas and 6th Avenue in Congress. I'm telling you, it is awesome. Please, somebody go and visit it. I just want to say, when they have the government pantry thing, and when you turn off of that, what's the Avenue H, and you go back around that corner there, y'all need to get that stuff straightened out. I don't know why. The older, please get that straightened out. Okay, and he was putting about this renovation or revelation, whatever you call for doing the neighborhood. How won't you just let me get y'all some people up and we just take care of our neighborhoods and we bring it to you and show you what really need to be. I'm going to go around with a camera and a video and I'm going to show y'all what y'all need to do where you falling slack on. Don't raise my water bill. I can't hardly pay enough, so don't be raising my water bill. I know you might have to do it though, but don't raise mine. I'm not saying about nobody else, but I'm talking about me. So we want to do all we can for our city. Hey, my girl right there, the chair. God is good. And we must honor him, must put him first for everything that you do. We pray for we come in here. But I want y'all to know that the water, if you need the people right, I'm going to take some pictures and bring them to this meeting so we can get our city straightened out. We all going to do it. Thank you. We're all going to do that so we can improve our city better. I see the chief here, so I'm over there again. The last time I come up, every time I got to always be behind him. But God is good. Thank God for everything that's been done. My mayor, everything that's being done for our city. You know, it's like, we have the little thing, so you take a village, we take our city to be the village to help us to each and every one. And the Bible says, whatever your hands find, you do that. Let us do what it does to make our city great.
Thank you for your comments, Ms. Williams.
That concludes public comments, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Moving on to item 7C. I'm sorry, 9C. Ordinance 4241.
Yes, ordinance number 4241, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Riviera Beach, Palm Beach County, Florida, modifying and updating the city's 5-year capital projects plans for fiscal years 2023/2024 through 2027/2028, providing for severability clause and providing for an effective date. Mr. Chair, we do have one public comment card on this item, and the acceptance of public comment cards on item 9C are now closed.
Motion to approve ordinance number 4241.
Second.
Motion been made and properly second. Mr. Evans?
Mr. Chair and members of the board, this ordinance is the approval of the capital improvements plan. This was provided for in the previous presentation when you heard the operation budget. Staff recommends approval of the final ordinance associated with the budget document.
Thank you. Board members? Councilman McCoy, go ahead.
So, Mr. Evans, how do we address the 22nd through 25th Street? Are you going to take that out, or do we need to make or take formal action to remove it? At least the funding source.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Mr. Evans, go ahead.
My intent was to take that particular item out, but if it is the board's desire to provide formal action, that's certainly available to you within your purview, but I was going to remove it administratively.
Any additional comments? That was actually my question as well, Mr. Evans, just to see what we're going to do with those fundings. So I didn't have any other questions about the capital improvement plan. Madam Clerk? You said we do have one public comment card?
Yes.
Please.
Miss Mary Brown?
This Mary Brown, Riviera Beach, and to the board in its entirety. The capital projects within any budget cycle, this is nothing new. And I hear the board dialoguing about this or that within your budgets. The dollar store is not $1 anymore. It is $1.25. And when that $1.25 adds up, that's revenue. That's revenue that is brought in to that dollar store. And we are no difference here. Yes, we are all in this pickle jar here together. We cannot have a city and do not meet and bring the things and bring the peoples in to help this city rise to the level that we know that it can rise. And what we as a city, governmental, our children, our businesses, everybody has to do their part. So yes, our water bill will be raised. We are no different than no other city. I always tell people Miss Graham is poor. I stand here and I say that I'm poor because it's only two classes of people now in this day and time. Either you're rich or either you're poor. So I fall in that category. And I still have to meet the obligations and needs that Miss Brown has to do. Not that she wants to do, but she has to do those things. Because FP&L is not going to say, well, Miss Brown cannot pay her $300 or $250 some light bill. Either I want my lights or I sit in the dark. Your city is operated, not just Riviera Beach, any city is operated in that same orbit. So your budget here is important. You do have that time frame that you must accomplish and get this budget done. And every year we hear this and we're tired of this. We are so sick and tired. The city obligations must be done, and they have to be done by not one, but all. All has to contribute to that pickle jar, because in that pickle jar, we're all jammed. And we will not come out until that jar there has released that pressure there. So residents, take into consideration, you're poor, but we must meet our obligations.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Brown. Any additional comments, Madam Clerk?
No, sir, that's the last public comment.
Any comments from the board? Madam Clerk?
Yes, I have a comment.
Councilman McCoy, go ahead.
I appreciate those comments, but I'm not in the pickle jar.
Thank you, Councilman McCoy. Madam Clerk?
Councilperson Botel?
Yes.
Councilperson Miller Anderson?
Yes.
Councilperson McCoy?
Yes.
Chair Pro Tem Lanier?
Yes.
Chairperson Lawson?
Yes.
That vote passes, Mr. Chair, unanimously.
Thank you, Madam Clerk.
You're welcome.
Discussion, deliberation, discussion by city manager?
Mr. Chair, if I may, just a couple of comments that were provided by the public with respect to the time that the board gets to be with the budget document. The budgeting process for the elected official as it relates to receiving information is usually August through the month of September is when discussions happen internally for city staff. The budget process really begins immediately following the adoption of the budget. So probably most likely in February and March, we're going to start on the next year's budget process. There were some comments with respect to the font. We can definitely look to try to maybe make some changes to that. And the item concerning the travel and the per diem, probably the travel was reduced as a result of there's been limited travel that has occurred, as a lot of travel has been diminished as a result of COVID, and most programs or most certification that our employees need can be done online. So you probably saw the reduction with respect to that, and per diem is because the cost for per diem for employees or what have you is going up, and you heard board members mention that. With respect to the line item for unemployment, if a person is displaced, the city does have to budget for those expenditures associated with unemployment if the benefit is provided. So I did want to address that. And then concerning the food and food distribution activities and persons littering back there, we can certainly look to address that. But most importantly, I want to thank the staff. This budget process and every budget process is definitely a labor of love. And I can tell you that we've had hundreds of hours worth of meetings and going back and forth to make the budget balance and to look at operational efficiencies and trying to meet the mark with respect to both what the board is looking to accomplish as well as what the community is asking for. So it is a difficult process, but to the management team and the staff, appreciate your tenacity, appreciate you working collectively to ensure that we do have a balanced budget. Some of these departments, I believe when they first came in with their budget requests, we were about $10 million over what the mark was. So we had to make some tough decisions and had to go in and clean up some operation elements to make the budget balance. And staff is going to continue to put in the effort, but I want to say thank you to the management team and your support staff for getting us to this point, and hopefully at our September 20th meeting, adopting the budget. But thank you to all of you for your work, effort, and commitment to putting the tireless amount of hours and answering the emails and phone calls concerning the budget. That concludes my comment, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Councilman McCoy, you had a response?
Yes, just clarification, Mr. Evans, I believe you said we started in August doing budget because I'm looking at the original document from the 22nd of July.
Oh, yeah, yep, you actually did get the, I'm just thinking about some of, sorry, I was mistaken, but yeah, you do get the budget document in July, but there is conversations that happen well before that concerning the budget document, but our meetings, vary depending on the availability and what the board has and what have you, so it's an everyday thing realistically.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Discussion by city attorney?
No, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Discussion by, city council committee reports?
Mr. Chair.
Councilwoman Botel, go ahead.
Yes, on August 30th, I attended the Palm Beach North Chamber Education Committee at Suncoast. We heard from students and staff about the work they're doing there to prepare our young people, and we also heard from the chief of staff and the school superintendent. On September 7th, I participated in the Florida League of Cities Legislative Policy Committee meeting on land use and economic development. On September 8th, I attended the Palm Beach North Chamber Government Affairs Committee, and this morning I presented at the Palm Beach North Chamber Business Before Hours Breakfast, the Mayor's Breakfast. I filled in for Mayor Felder. And for you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Botel. Comments from the board, starting with Mayor Felder.
No comments, but I do want to thank Dr. Botel for stepping in for me. Thank you.
Councilman McCoy.
No, sir.
Councilwoman Lanier.
Yes. To Is this on? Collaborating with the seniors and residents in a partnership with Bridges to provide access to residents in need with free phone or tablet. This includes unlimited text, talk, and data. You can contact my office. Also, I'd like to give a happy 80th birthday to my father. He turns 80 years old today. He still cuts his own grass, and he watches every single council meeting. And without his counsel, I tell you, so happy birthday, Dad.
Happy birthday, Dad.
Happy birthday. Councilwoman Botel.
Yes, on August 31st, I met with CareerSource to discuss workforce development opportunities, particularly in the construction industry. So as you know, I'm passionate about trying to develop our residents to take advantage of the jobs that will be created as a result of the huge amount of construction that's going to happen here in our city in the next few years. In fact, on September 5th, I visited North Tech, hadn't been there in a while, and I wanted to see what they were up to discuss their apprenticeship and pre-apprenticeship programs and to see how we could maximize the number of Riviera Beach residents who take advantage of those programs. They have pre-apprentice and apprentice programs in carpentry, electrical, HVAC, plumbing, and welding. So we really need to try to get as many people into those programs as possible. And then finally, at Palm Beach State College, we are going to offer our Palm Beach State College, City of Riviera Beach College Credit Certificate Program, probably starting in the October semester. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilwoman Miller Anderson.
I have none.
Thank you. And I just wanted to announce as well that on September 25th, I'll be having Understanding Your Teens, a mental health forum dedicated and catering to our youth and our teens in our community. It'll be right here in the marina. So please bring all the children out. We've been having these forums monthly, but our kids have been impacted by COVID by the time that our parents are trying to figure out what's going on and how to proceed. And we focused on the adults, but we forgot about our children. So I want to make sure that we focus on them for this mental health forum that's going to be on September 25th. It's going to be partnering with officially ESA Mind Over You. And we're going to have a teen poem contest by the Desire Group. And on September 28th, there will be a Collaborate and Connect community business mixer hosted by the City of Riviera Beach, Palm Beach, the Black Chamber of Commerce, and the BBIC. Those will be on that date, so please be here from 6 to 8 p.m. We'll have representatives. Making some comments before we close, I had a question for our city attorney, Attorney Nguyen. There were some comments about reconsideration for an item in a discussion of the safe harbor item that was disposed of last week. In regards to reconsideration or rehearing, would that be able to be done if that was brought to the table at this special meeting tonight?
Mr. Chair, I'm afraid she can't answer that question because I specifically called her this week to ask her parliamentary question. So certainly I hope she wouldn't be able to give you that answer tonight.
Okay, so I would actually allow for my attorney to let me know if that's something you could answer or not.
So typically, I am not the parliamentarian, and that's the discussion that Mr. McCoy and I had. However, I have assisted the clerk in the past on parliamentary issues.
Okay, so being that we're in the public setting, there has been some new information brought out, discussion and conversation, and I wanted to see if my colleagues would entertain a special meeting to be held next week. Being that we're not going to take any official action tonight, if we can't have an open discussion about entertaining a special meeting to move forward with having conversation and hearing from our residents and hearing some of the concerns that they've addressed that they felt like they were not heard next week, Tuesday or Wednesday, to address Safe Harbor. Tuesday would be 6 p.m., Wednesday would be 5 p.m. We've noticed 2 meetings for Wednesday, which are 5:30 and 6 o'clock. The meeting would have to be held before the 5:30 meeting, but would have to end abruptly at 5:30, which I don't think would give my residents enough time. So I would prefer Tuesday, colleagues.
The 19th?
The 19th.
Yeah, I'm good.
Tuesday.
Tuesday, the 19th, 6 p.m.
I have
To have
another, so
I'm sorry, Ms. Miller Anderson, I couldn't hear you.
I have another meeting already scheduled on Tuesday.
Okay. Board members? Councilwoman Botel?
Yes, it's 6 o'clock. So, yes.
Councilman McCoy?
So a few things. Number one, what exactly should we expect? I
Safe
mean,
harbor discussion.
well, allow me to finish, please.
Of course.
So we're having a special meeting to hear, are we going to be deliberating on something? I mean, is there an expectation that some action? Because I mean, obviously, I've heard from quite a few of them by email and phone call. How is this different than any other communication method? And why do we need to actually do a meeting after this item has been disposed of?
Well, I believe we instructed our attorney not to give any parliamentary procedure, but I wouldn't want her to give any recommendation. But from my understanding, the discussion of proceeding with an item, if I chose to actually have this item reconsidered, I would have that option to do that at a preceding meeting of the last regular city council meeting, from my understanding. But being that you don't want clarity from our city attorney, who is not our parliamentary, I want us to have a discussion about the safe harbor items so that we could discuss in the sunshine the items that have come before me for reconsideration.
Okay, I'm gonna restate this. I'm asking you, the proposer, what is your purpose? What's your expectation of this meeting? It has
Again-
nothing to do with Ms. Nguyen.
Again, I've already stated on the record, a safe harbor discussion. Did you need more than that, Councilman McCoy?
Yes, but it's already been disposed of. So what exactly needs to be done? And then here's the thing: what happens if we show up and then there's no residents? I mean, I guess I've heard from those who intended to participate, especially those that were affected because they received notice. So is there something that I'm missing or that's not available to all of the members?
Well,
That we need to have a special meeting to rehash something that everybody who was affected was already noticed on?
Again, Councilman, it would be the pleasure of the board.
It's a simple
So-
question. If you're,
So, Councilman, can I finish, or would you like to continue speaking?
no, I want to make sure you hear me out.
I heard
Like,
you perfectly, and I'm trying to respond.
Well, please,
Thank
pick
you.
it up. Let's go,
So,
because like,
Please don't rush me, Councilman. Please consider who's the chair. I would like you to understand that in response to your question, I've requested my colleagues a special meeting on the 19th or the 20th. For your understanding, if we want to talk about no residents showing up, we're giving them notice that we would have a special meeting to continue the discussion of safe harbor. And if we had a marketing director, that'd be the person that would go ahead and put it out. So Councilman McCoy, to that point, Tuesday, 6 p.m., colleagues?
okay,
or
so
Wednesday,
here's my
5
follow-up
p.m.
to that. Here's my follow-up to that, Mr. Chair. When we conclude, and there's going to be a conference in, I think it's the week of the 20th of October, we would have met probably for 13 consecutive weeks once this is done. Now you're sitting here adding another day, and I'm gonna tell you specifically about Safe Harbor, whether you know it or not. Not only were they informed 4 times by mail. This came to the city council twice. this came to the Planning and Zoning Board twice. They were informed by mail and the traditional public notice. So I'm trying to figure out what exactly is your expectation. You keep saying we want to talk to the residents, but what do you expect to derive out of meeting with them again after 4 attempts where they literally got a postcard at their door? So I mean to tell me, like, perhaps they didn't get the mail?
So I guess for clarity, just to give you some insight for the safe harbor discussion,
Please,
that the
indulge me.
residents just realized tonight that the 22nd through 25th Street renovations, revitalization, $2 million that was coming from the impact fees that was written into the budget will be removed. So that's one discussion that we can actually discuss that will not be actually happening. So having that idea of what will and where will those dollars come from, being that we're removing that with the safe harbor discussion. The item was disposed of, and it has the ability to be brought back, from my understanding, at the next regular city council meeting, if I so choose. And I have that ability to bring it back for reconsideration, being that I was on the prevailing side. So I would like to have this discussion with the residents so that we could get some additional insight. And I've been having meetings with the residents to discuss this item. So that's where I would like to have it in the sunshine with my colleagues, with the board, I'm not talking about safe harbor, I'm talking about my residents in this board. So if you're able to attend, I understand we've had a lot of meetings, so I've been here by your side that whole time. So if you're available for Tuesday, 6 p.m., or Wednesday, 5 o'clock, I'd prefer it to be Tuesday, simply because I don't want us to have to run into another meeting to stop.
Mr. Chair.
Councilman McCoy, go ahead.
So is it about safe harbor, the project, or is it about hearing from the residents? Because I've heard you say both. And specifically, if it's about hearing from the residents, I think you can accomplish that by hosting a workshop. Do you plan on reintroducing, do you plan on bringing this item back for consideration? Because obviously, Mr. Evans made it perfectly clear that this was a plan. This capital plan can be changed and modified at any point. So what exactly are we addressing at this meeting? I mean, what's going to be on the agenda? Is it going to be rehearing the safe harbor item, or is it going to be addressing the capital improvements item?
Well, again, based on Robert's rules, I can't rehear or notice that we're going to bring that or call that reconsideration at this special meeting. The only time I could do that would be a regular city council meeting, sir. So we wouldn't be doing that based upon Robert's rules of order.
I don't know what you just said. That there's nothing.
Based on Robert's rules of
that's
order,
not
we
backed
wouldn't
in.
be rehearing or reconsidering this item because I can't bring that motion at a special council meeting, sir.
Okay, but
Was that clear?
yes, but what I'm saying
Thank
to you is you have not established what the purpose is. Are we going to be discussing safe harbor? Or are we discussing the capital items? I mean, obviously, staff has to go and prepare some sort of agenda. What does the agenda say?
Safe harbor, Councilman McCoy.
Okay.
And I believe that the capital projects would be deriving dollars from that safe harbor project. So that would be part of the discussion, Councilman McCoy.
Okay.
Board members? It's Tuesday, 6 p.m., okay? Councilwoman Miller Anderson said that she has a conflict. Do we have any other members that have a conflict as well? Mayor?
I'm good.
Councilman McCoy?
Yeah, I would much rather be at home with my 9-year-old, but I mean,
Thank you. Mr. Evans, if we can have that noticed and have that information disseminated to our residents to have a discussion on Tuesday, the 19th at 6 p.m. to discuss the safe harbor item.
Mr. Chair, just as a point of clarity for both the clerk and legal, I'm assuming we're expecting formal action from the board with respect to that, or is it?
The charter requires that either the mayor or 2 council members submit in writing the request for the special meeting, and so typically the clerk will coordinate that.
So once that particular process is facilitated, however, and by whomever, then staff will go through the procedural process to make the rooms available and work on crafting an agenda item to the point.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Board members, any additional comments?
yes, Mr. Chair.
Councilman McCoy, go ahead.
How's that true when we just had both this meeting and the meeting? This is a special meeting that wasn't called by the mayor, nor was it called by 2 elected officials. And I literally looked in the Palm Beach Post and I struggled to find where this was actually published the notice for this meeting?
Mr. Chair, with respect to the notice, I will defer to Ms. Reynolds as she handles the notices for the budget and the budget process. And I think it was consistent with that when the county has theirs, and obviously the school district, why we had to set the date for the 13th for the first reading. Ms. Reynolds, if you want to provide some clarity with respect to the notice and the notice requirements for the budget.
The notice, for the first hearing is published on the tax bill that's provided to each property tax owner. Then the notice of, for the second and final reading will be published in the Palm Beach Post for Sunday for the meeting to be held on September the 20th.
Thank you, but I just think I recall having this conversation before the meeting, that statute still requires that any public hearing of an ordinance as provided for in Florida Statutes 166.041 is advertised in the newspaper of circulation. So you're saying that that wasn't done and the only thing occurred was the tax bill, the trim notice?
Yes, that's how we've done it, always done it in the past.
Okay.
I did have a follow-up to that. Public notice will be posted on Sunday. Is there a time frame on when public notice has to go out for notice to the residents for the second reading? I thought it was 7 days. Is it only 7 to 10 days? Does that give us sufficient time to have the second reading on the 20th?
Yes, it's 2 to 3 days prior to the meeting. So this will be published in the newspaper on Sunday of the Palm Beach Post.
Thank you. Any further comments? We will start our next meeting, our CRA meeting in 5 minutes, 8:40, with no further business. Meeting's adjourned.